Um, so that was totally not how I was hoping this week would start. It was completely different. And I'm just going to ask, can we just get the house lights up for a minute? Because I've been doing events for a long time, as Leanne and Nat have said. I've been doing TEDx Christchurch for 7 years. And in every event that I open, I come out on stage and I go, how are you guys doing? And it's like, it's a game. I go, how are you guys doing? And you all go, yeah. But today, maybe I say, how are you guys doing? And you're like, sort of excited to be here, but also freaked out and shaken up and whatever. So I guess I don't really have a way to genuinely ask how you guys are doing, because there are like 1,500 of you here. But I just want to acknowledge that this is like an unusual moment, and I want to acknowledge you for facing it, for going through it last night, for showing up today. And I'd like to invite you to give yourselves and all of our speakers and our whole team backstage, our tech team, our rigging team, just give yourselves, please, a round of applause for just being here. And I just want to ask, where people are from. Like, did anyone, okay, so who had to evacuate from a hotel last night? Anyone had to go out from a hotel into the street, into this, okay? Okay. Who lives in, like, New Brighton, Sumner, South Shore? You guys, who had to evacuate your homes last night? Right, I evacuated, my partner and I and my 3 stepsons, we evacuated at 3 in the morning. I haven't been home yet. I haven't really slept much. I can tell you I'm really glad we have these volunteer t-shirts, or I would be presenting to you right now in my jammies and dressing gown. And I know you guys would be cool with that, so thank you. Who here is from, can I get just a cheer if you're from Christchurch? Awesome. Okay, really? Like, that was good. But we need to move into the kind of, okay, now we've like acknowledged the shakiness, and we have to maybe now move into the mode of we're excited to be here. So we'll try Christchurch once again, and then we're going to move on from you. Can I just say, who here is from Christchurch? Can I hear from you? All right. That's a little bit better. Okay, so who here from Wellington? Wellington. Awesome. Auckland. Auckland is great. This is probably super rude. Like, I've been in New Zealand 11 years. I am a citizen, but I know this is going to be super culturally insensitive to just name Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, and then say, who is from elsewhere in New Zealand? But who is from elsewhere in New Zealand? Can I hear from you? Okay, great. We've got people from 12 countries represented at this summit. We have people here from Japan. Who's from Japan? Patrick, where are you? Patrick's here from Japan. We've got people from Hungary. We've got people from the Philippines, from China, Singapore. Who's here from Australia? Let me hear you from Australia. We've got like 100 people. They didn't do a very good job at their cheer, but we have like 100 people here from Australia. And of course, our dear friends, the people who are really the ones making this summit possible. Who here is from the United States of America, from Singularity University, just from the United States generally, with SU or not? Let me hear from you. Can we try that one more time? Who here is from the I know you're a little embarrassed right now. We were going to have immigration on standby, and then last night happened, and we were like, oh, maybe not. Who here is from the United States of America? Let me hear you. Thank you. And now I will ask the question that everyone here is wondering, which is, what the hell happened? Seriously, how crazy is this? Like, everybody was stunned by this, right? I was completely stunned by this result. I was like, there is no way this can happen. Everybody was stunned by this. Every poll got it wrong. Nate Silver, the guru statistician who achieved this like tremendous fame in the US in 2012 because he correctly predicted the way every single state was going to vote. The morning of the election last week, Nate Silver had Hillary Clinton coming in at 71.4%. Everybody got it wrong, except this fish. And this artificially intelligent forecasting system that correctly anticipated the results of the election weeks before it happened. This is the world that we're in today. The artificially intelligent system gets it right, and all the humans get it wrong. This is the kind of question we might not be able to answer over the next 3 days, but we're certainly going to do our best to explore. So my name is Kaila Colbin. I'm the New Zealand ambassador for Singularity University, and welcome once again to this momentous event. We are delighted and honored that you could be here. And I would like to ask just quickly, because I've spent the last 18 months kind of traveling the country giving spiels about exponentials to anyone who will lend me an ear. How many of you, can I just get a show of hands, how many of you have heard me give an Intro to Exponentials presentation before? Right, lots, okay. So to you guys, I will say, I have done my best to change this up so you won't be excruciatingly bored by it. But I will also say, in order for the next 3 days to make sense, we have to have a common baseline. And that's the purpose of this presentation. So I thank you for your forbearance. As I said, I'm the New Zealand ambassador for Singularity University, which is an organization dedicated to the study of exponentially accelerating technologies, and specifically how they can be used to address humanity's biggest challenges. Things like food, water, healthcare, learning, disaster resilience. Singularity University was founded in 2009 by these two guys, and these guys are really titans of the tech world. The guy on the right, Peter Diamandis, he founded X Prize Foundation, which does large cash prizes for extremely ambitious but extremely well-bounded engineering challenges. The first one that they did was a $10 million prize for the first private group that could get a manned vehicle to space and back, land it safely, and then repeat that feat within 2 weeks. And that prize is what led to SpaceX, it led to Virgin Galactic, like pretty much the entire private space industry was kickstarted by this large cash prize. And they've replicated that model over and over in arena after arena. They've done X prizes for drought and for education. And they found that as a model for spurring investment into R&D for innovation, it's tremendously effective. They put up this large cash prize, they put up this incredibly compelling challenge, and the teams collectively will invest anywhere from 10 to 100 times the value of the prize in working towards their solution. Tremendously effective. He's done many more things than that. He started International Space University. He's written several books. He's an incredibly accomplished character. The guy on the left, Ray Kurzweil, he invented like everything. Seriously, he invented flatbed scanners. He invented optical character recognition. He invented text-to-speech for blind people. He invented the Kurzweil synthesizer. He's been named the rightful heir to Edison. He's got honorary doctorates from 21 universities and received honors from 3 US presidents, like a real underachiever kind of guy. But one of the most interesting things about him is that they've gone back and looked at the predictions he's made about where technology is going since the early 90s. And they found that he has an 86% accuracy rate. So if you think about the kind of tremendous technological change we've seen in the past 20, 30 years, 86% is an incredible feat. To the specificity of, he predicted that by 1998, a computer would beat a human at chess, and in 1997, IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. That level of specificity. So when Ray Kurzweil says something about where technology is going, it's generally worth paying attention to. Right, what I want you to take away from my talk are 3 key insights that I took away when I attended the executive program at Singularity University in March of 2015. And the first insight starts with this guy. So this is Gordon Moore. He's one of the co-founders of Intel Corporation. And in 1965, he made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling like every 18 to 24 months or so, as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we could see. This became known as Moore's Law. If you're at this event, you've probably heard of it. Moore's Law, here's what it looks like in terms of gigaflops. So a flops, many of you probably know, is a floating point operation per second. A gigaflops is a billion of those. A gigaflops is a way of measuring like how many instructions a computer can handle. And in 1961, 1 gigaflops cost $8.3 trillion. This is inflation-adjusted US 2013 dollars, cost $8.3 trillion. to generate 1 gigaflops of processing capability. By 1984, 23 years later, that number had dropped to 42.8 million. I think my math is right on here. It's a 200,000 times decrease in 23 years. By 1997, we were down to 42,000. By 2007, to $52. And by 2015, 8 cents. It's a decrease of 100 trillion times in just over 50 years. That's what Moore's Law looks like in action. I'm going to make this a little more personal for you guys. How many, show of hands, how many people in this room have an iPhone 6? If you have an iPhone 6, put your hands up. All right, awesome. Your iPhone 6 has 115 gigaflops in it. When that phone came out in 2014, it cost $649. But if you were to have tried to buy something like that in 1997, forget about the fact that it wouldn't have fit in your pocket. It would have cost you $4.8 million. If you tried to buy it in 1984, it would have cost you $5 trillion. So congratulations, iPhone 6 users. You all have $5 trillion worth of technology in your pocket. There is nowhere you can cash it in, but still it's very exciting. And the first insight that I want you to take away from this talk is that what we're here to talk about is not Moore's Law. It is not about the transistors. Remember, Moore said what was doubling was the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit. And Ray Kurzweil, he of the 86% accuracy rate, zoomed out on that. And he said, actually, if instead of looking at the number of transistors we can fit on an integrated circuit, we look instead at what we call the price performance of computing. How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000? Turns out that number has been doubling for over 100 years. Going way back to the beginning of computing, starting with electromechanical punch cards, and then moving on to relays, and then vacuum tubes, and then transistors, and then integrated circuits. Moore's Law is the 5th iteration of this underlying doubling paradigm, not the first. It's the price performance of computing that we care about. Worth noting on this chart that the y-axis is on a log scale. That means every single increment on it is 10 times the previous increment. We couldn't put it on a linear scale. It would reach Saturn. Here's another way to think about it. Today, for $1,000, you can buy roughly the number of instructions per second that a mouse brain can process. But according to Kurzweil, by about 2023, for $1,000, you'll be able to buy the number of instructions per second that a human brain can process. And if that doubling curve continues, by 2049, for $1,000, you'll be able to buy the number of instructions per second of all human brains on the planet combined. So that's the first insight, price performance of computing. Second insight is that it's not about computing. Not only about computing. This doubling curve applies to any information-enabled technology. So think about something like photography. Photography used to be substrate-enabled. It was dependent on the physical film for you to do the thing. And then it became information-enabled, dependent instead on ones and zeros. And once that happens, it also started to follow a doubling in price performance on a consistent basis. And today, you can buy a smartphone with a 41 megapixel camera in it, and you don't really think twice about that. That seems kind of normal. So some of the technologies that have become digitally enabled and are now starting to follow these doubling curves include, of course, computing as the base one, but also artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, medicine, neuroscience, energy, all following similar doubling curves. Right. Why should we care so much? What's so interesting about doubling curves? Well, it turns out they have a few characteristics that make them kind of imperative for us to pay attention to. And the first is that they look flat for a really long time. And you'll know this if you've ever tried to do that trick where you fold a piece of paper in half 8 times, right? First fold is easy, second fold is easy, third fold is easy, 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 easy. You're like, this trick is so dumb. Why am I even doing it? It's so easy. And it's not until you hit that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper that things start to get really crazy. The second characteristic is that our brains are totally not wired for it. We evolved on the savannah, chasing prey and running from predators that behaved in predictable linear ways. I see I see it. Nat told me I wouldn't see it, but I see it. Everyone okay? I can't feel anything up here. I'm all good. All right, cool. I'm just going to keep going. All right. The second thing is that our brains are totally not wired for this, right? We evolved on the savannah, as I said, chasing prey, running from predators that behaved in predictable, linear fashions. We did not evolve to chase prey that could all of a sudden run from here to the moon. And so as a result, the experts continue to predict linear, no matter how much evidence we have to the contrary. Gordon Moore himself twice said that Moore's law was over, both times proven wrong. Like, the guy who invented the law can't get his own law right. So I had no idea what hope the rest of us mortals have. But the difference between something following a linear progression and something following a doubling curve is insane. 30 linear steps, and we're at the muster point out front. Good to know. 30 doubling steps, and you're 26 times around the planet. And the tricky thing there is that you're not halfway until the 29th step. So it's really hard to measure, it's really hard to track how we're going along the way. So I asked at the beginning a show of hands of how many people have seen me do this talk, and as I've been doing this talk over the past 18 months, I've been staying abreast of all of the developments in kind of exponential technologies. And what I want to do now is give you just a quick, 18 months in an exponential world. These are just some of the things that have happened since I graduated from the executive program in March of 2015, some of the insane developments that we've seen happen. And so the first is that with self-driving cars, and you're going to hear from Brad Templeton tomorrow, who worked on the Google self-driving car program, and we'll go into depth about this. But in the past 18 months, we've seen in June of 2015, Google's self-driving car program hit 1 million miles traveled. In October 2015, Tesla launched Autopilot as a push update to owners of the Model S. That means those people got this as a overnight, wirelessly, while they slept. They didn't have to do anything to get it. They woke up in the morning, and their cars had autopilot functionality. By June of this year, Tesla cars had logged over 100 million miles in autopilot mode. They were collecting 1 million miles of data every 10 hours. So think about that. A year after Google's self-driving car program hit 1 million miles total, Tesla's collecting 1 million miles of data every 10 hours. And just last month, Tesla announced that they hit 222 million miles traveled, and they announced that every car built from here on out is going to have the hardware necessary for full level 5 autonomy. Every car they build from here on out. In March of this year, Google's DeepMind program, AlphaGo, beat Lee Sedol, the world Go champion, at the game of Go. This is an incredible achievement for artificial intelligence. Deep Blue and Kasparov was amazing, but the thing about that was that it was actually a brute force problem. Chess is a complicated game, but it's a game that you could theoretically work through all of the possibilities and just figure out what is the best possibility, which is what they did. They basically had to wait until they had a computer that was fast enough and big enough to work through all of the possibilities and come up with a move in a good enough period of time. Go is not like that. The number of possible moves in Go is greater than the number of atoms in the universe. And this happened a decade before the researchers thought it was going to happen. And here's the interesting thing. Once it happened, interest and investment in artificial intelligence skyrocketed. So the South Korean government said that they were going to commit $3 billion to investing in artificial intelligence research. And of course, what happens when that level of interest and that level of investment skyrockets is that progress in that area continues to accelerate. We now have drones in Rwanda that are delivering blood. They've taken the time for a life-saving blood delivery down from 4 hours to 15 minutes. And this one from just last week, paralyzed monkeys are able to walk again with a brain implant that completely bypasses the misfunctioning nerves, and human trials are next. Now these are awesome headlines, and you're going to hear dozens, if not hundreds, of examples like these over the next 3 days. And what I want you to think about when you're hearing all of these examples is what it feels like to stand here. This is from the incredible blog, Wait But Why. Ben Reed, if you're here, Ben Reed is the guy who turned me on to this blog, waitbutwhy.com. He wrote a 2-part series on artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence that if you're here, I would say is essential reading. And so he says, what does it feel like to stand here? This is really where we are. This is what a doubling curve looks like, right? Flat, 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 flat. Inflection point, 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper. Boom, chaos and amazement. So what does it feel like to be standing at that inflection point, that moment when we're about to break into this brave new world? Doesn't it feel like incredible and intimidating and awe-inspiring? And it doesn't. It feels like this. Because you can't see that in front of you, right? You can't see that crazy wall in front of you. And so what I want you to be thinking about as we go through the next 3 days and you're listening to all of these presenters and you hear someone talk about a technology and you go, that technology sounds amazing. That's so cool that they've done that, right? You put it in the past tense. Or you go, that technology is incredible, but it's not going to work for me because it can't do this. Remember that we're here and not here. I mean, we're here, but it's really here, right? Remember that. Remember the trajectory. Don't just think about where we are today. Think about the trajectory. Right. So insight number 1, not just about transistors, it's about the price performance of computing. Insight number 2, not just about computing, it's about any information-enabled technology. Insight number 3 is that these technologies are now starting to converge. So now we have to consider what happens when an exponential progression in something like artificial intelligence converges with an exponential progression in big data or robotics. What happens when an exponential progression in biotechnology or bioengineering converges with an exponential progression in 3D printing at the atomic scale. And of course, what happens is that everything accelerates even faster. And we get what we call the 6 Ds of exponential technologies. So the first D is that something becomes digitized. Think back to that photography, right? It goes from being substrate-enabled to being digitally enabled, dependent on ones and zeros. And once that happens, it starts to follow a doubling curve. And because that doubling curve looks flat for a really long time, it is in a stage of deceptiveness, right? Where it's going from 0.001 to 0.002 to 0.004 to 0.008. Sure, doubling, but from the outside looking like nothing much is really happening. And then it hits that inflection point, that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper, and it goes from deception into disruptiveness. So it's kind of a visualization of that. So that white line is what we call traditional linear business growth. It's held aloft by sustaining innovations, right? You have your car, and it goes from having a tape player to having a CD player to having a 6 CD changer to having a Bluetooth, right? Like it's still doing the same thing it did, but just maybe a little bit better. It's not like a true disruption. That red line is a technology that has become digitally enabled. It's following a deceptively flat line, and it's doubling. 3D printing is a really good example of this. 3D printing, I hadn't realized until I went to SU, has been around for over 35 years, right? Following this deceptive curve, hanging out in what we call the trough of disappointment, not really realizing its promise just yet. And then it hits that 6th, 7th, 8th fold of the paper, that inflection point, and it goes from deception into disruption. And all of the incumbents on that white line say, it came out of nowhere. There's no way we could have known. Right. Those 3 things happen, and then we get the next 3, which are that once a technology becomes digitized, it starts to grow towards dematerialization. You no longer need a flashlight. You have a phone. You no longer need a GPS machine in your car. You have an app on your phone. You no longer need a stethoscope. You have a phone. You can download an app. So we move away from the physical manifestations of these objects and move towards digital representations of them, usually on our phones. They also become demonetized, right? Think about something like GPS, which used to cost $300, $500, $1,000, right, to have a good system in your car, and now it's free with every single phone that you buy. And this is what happens when things become digitized, is that the price drives towards free, which is why Peter Diamandis always talks about us moving into an age of abundance. And once it becomes demonetized and dematerialized, it also becomes democratized. We have 3 billion new minds coming online by 2020. And once things are dematerialized, it's much easier to disseminate all of this power, all this capability, all this functionality to people if we don't need to be sending flashlights, torches out to everybody, if we don't need to be sending GPS boxes out to everybody, right? What does all of this add up to? Huge opportunity. And this is one of the things we're going to be exploring for the next 3 days, is the tremendous opportunity that these exponential technologies present for us. And not just opportunity in a financial sense, right? Opportunity in a social sense. And I will say, one of the ways in which I diverge somewhat from Singularity University's standard line, and I know the SU people are here and they don't know what I'm about to say, so they might be freaking out right about now. But one of the ways in which we diverge slightly is that I feel that SU as an organization is, like, they've told me, unashamedly optimistic, right? Like universally optimistic. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I think we have to be really cognizant of both of those things, but tremendous opportunity, not just in terms of financial opportunity, but in terms of social opportunity. And the reason I tell you about that divergence is because I don't say social opportunity with the thought that technology can solve our social problems by itself. It can't. Technology is a tool. But it is a tool that we can leverage in ways that we have never been able to leverage tools before. And I think if we turn our brain power and our hearts and our attention towards solving some of society's biggest challenges, then we can leverage that technology to have impacts far beyond what was possible before. This revolution also brings with it a not insignificant amount of terror. And we're going to be discussing that over the next 3 days as well. Catherine Myronik will be talking about the future of jobs. The number that is most often cited is this one: 47 to 81% of jobs, as we currently understand them, under threat from technology within the next 20 years. Now, this headline came out maybe 2 months ago. You might have seen it. Foxconn, which is one of Apple's factories in China, they fired 60,000 workers and replaced them with robots. This is an awful headline. It's terrible, right? I mean, there's no kind of sugarcoating it. I do not want to diminish in any way what the effect is on these 60,000 people, on their families, on their lives. Maybe they all got new jobs. I have no idea what, but I don't want to dismiss this headline. But I will say, for those of us in the Western world, this is a narrative that we've heard before. We're familiar with this plotline. Factory workers replaced by automation. We know that story, right? That story's been happening for 100 years. Less so this one: artificially intelligent lawyer hired by its first law firm. Or this one: artificially intelligent chatbot successfully contests 160,000 parking tickets in New York and London. I love this. This is a free service. It was created by a 19-year-old. It's called Do Not Pay. I don't know if it'll work here in New Zealand, but we should give it a try. And the kid says it's just the tip of the iceberg, so we should all be following that guy. Or this headline: artificially intelligent teaching assistant helped students online for an entire semester and nobody noticed. So what we're seeing now is that the cognitive capabilities of robots and computers and artificial intelligence are becoming so great that they're starting to encroach on areas that have typically, historically, been the exclusive domain of humans. And that's something we really need to be paying attention to. That thing about the future of jobs, the 47 to 81%, I don't say that to fearmonger. We've got 200 years of headlines saying the robots are going to take all our jobs. And every time new technologies come along, the combine harvester, the automatic sewing machine, they create more jobs than they do away with, right? So we don't necessarily know how it's going to play out, but we've never been here at this speed and at this scale, and we have to be paying attention to it. We have to be thinking about it. We can't wait and just trust it's all going to be okay. So that's the terror. But I did say terror and opportunity. How awesome was Leanne's Chinese, by the way? I don't remember what the two things were, but let's pretend it's terror and opportunity. Right, here is an awesome chart. This chart is called Welcome to the Terror Dome. I didn't name that. The chart was named by the people who made it, which are those crazy cats at the Energy Information Agency, the CIA, and the World Bank. And what this chart is graphing, it's kind of an inverse of the price performance of computing chart that I showed at the beginning. And what we have here is the price per million BTUs of energy by different fuel types, by 5 different fuel types. So along the y-axis, we've got that price per million BTUs. The x-axis is the year. The chart starts at 1949 and moves up to 2012. And starting in 1949 and bumping along the bottom, they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. Over time, they gradually trend upwards. Those are our fossil fuels. Those are our linear technologies. That is what linear technologies do. They bump up and down. They go up, they go down. Over time, they gradually trend upwards. And then what happens? Way over here. Doesn't even come onto the chart until like 2006. And when it comes onto the chart, it's so expensive that all the incumbents are like, it's never going to compete. And then the price plummets. That's solar. Right? Solar's gone from, oh, I just don't have these numbers perfect in my head. It's like $77 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour in such a brief period of time. When I did the exec program, they told us that solar was following a doubling in price performance every 22 months. And that at current rates of progress, we were going to hit 100% of world energy supply deliverable by solar within 21 years. And think about that. If solar is following a doubling curve, what does that mean? It means after that, we hit 200%. 2 years after that, we hit 400%, 800%. And we have to completely shift our mental framework away from a scarcity model and towards an abundance model. What does the world look like when energy is free and abundant? What does the world look like when education is free and abundant, when healthcare is free and abundant? We built our entire economic system based on the allocation of scarce resources, and that is an assumption that may no longer hold true. More of that opportunity. This is an organization associated with Singularity University. It came out of their Global Solutions program. This is called MatterNet. They're using drones to deliver medicines and essential supplies to the 2 billion people in the world that don't have access to all-season roads. This is the Scanadu Scout. It's part of a $10 million tricorder X Prize for the first handheld device that can beat the diagnosis of 7 out of 10 board-certified physicians across a range of 12 ailments. They started with over 300 teams for this prize. They're down to the final 7. They're doing clinical trials now. The winner will be announced early next year. This is the Star Trek tricorder for the Star Trek fans in the room. It's real. It's a thing. You can buy it. It's not just like crazy, like PhD tech geniuses. This kid invented a thing called Firefly, which is a drone that uses artificial intelligence to scan buildings after a disaster and indicate to first responders where the survivors are. And these 3 teenagers, something so relevant here in Christchurch and particularly relevant after last night, these 3 teenagers did a 5-week program with Brett Schilke and others at Singularity University in California. And they invented something called disaster mesh. So disaster mesh, right, so last night we were super lucky. Like it was a bad earthquake, but in Christchurch we know what really bad earthquakes are like. And when it's really bad, all the comms go down, right? You can't text anybody, you can't get on the internet, you can't do anything because everyone jumps on at the same time, they break the system. So what does disaster mesh do? It's an airdropped mesh network. You have a disaster, comms go down, they drop these nodes. The nodes are modeled on maple seeds, so they float down from the sky, so you don't have a thing where like you've just been through an earthquake and then you get donked on the head with this node. So they float down, and then anyone within range of this mesh network, when you turn on your device, it comes up automatically with a landing page that says, I need food, I need water, I'm trapped, I'm okay. Think about the transformative power of a technology like that for disaster resilience. They've now gotten a patent for that technology. They got a $250,000 US grant to commercialize it, and this will be a thing that will be available to us. So all of this amazing stuff happening, why New Zealand? Why did I come back from the executive program so obsessed with bringing this information here, with convening you in this room for the next 3 days so that we could collectively get a greater understanding of this stuff? And I will tell you that it's because a couple of things happened to me when I was there. And one of them that happened was that I heard about a whole bunch of data points that I had already heard about before, and I understood them in a completely different way. And I really hope this happens to you, because you're going to hear about a lot of things over the next 3 days that you've heard about before, like 3D printing. You've heard about 3D printing before, right? Robotics, you've heard about robotics before. And what happened to me was that it was like watching one of those Facebook videos where someone's got a huge round canvas and they're doing a painting and they're just doing splashes of color and you can't tell what they're painting at all, and they're just doing this, and it takes like 2 minutes, and then they do the final thing of color and they flip it upside down and it's like Nelson Mandela. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody? Do I spend too much time on Facebook? Yes, probably. But that's what it was like. It was like I'd heard about all these things, and then I attended the exec program, and I got this coherent narrative for them. I got a cohesive framework, this like new paradigm that made all of those data points carry a whole new level of meaning than they had previously. And I'm going to give you one example of that. So 3D printing I mentioned earlier. 3D printing's been around for over 35 years. 35 years, and what have we gotten from it? Shitty models of Yoda's head. This is not revolutionary, right? There is no incumbent shitty Yoda's head model industry freaking out because the maker bots are coming to eat their lunch. But so here's what happens. I go to the exec program, and I come away with this new coherent narrative, with this new paradigm. And a week later, I go to TED. And at TED, this guy, Joseph D. Simone, gets up on stage, and he's like, 3D printing sucks. And the reason it sucks is because it's not actually 3D printing. It's 2D printing over and over again. You print a layer, and then another layer, and another layer, and another layer. So as a result, it's really hard. You can't do bridges, you can't do spans, you can't do free-floating objects within objects. The mechanical tolerances are terrible, the structural integrity is terrible. It's super slow, and it's super expensive. And he's like, I don't want a 3D printer that's a 2D printer over and over again. I want a 3D printer that works more like the T-1000 from Terminator 2. He's like, I want my object to just emerge fully formed from the substrate soup and just be the thing that I want it to be. And so he built it. That's what he was there at TED to launch. This is it. It's called CLIP, Continuous Liquid Interface Production. That plate at the top pulls the object fully formed from this tray of substrate soup at the bottom. It solves every problem with current 3D printing. You can do bridges, you can do spans, you can do objects within objects. The mechanical tolerances are perfect, the structural integrity is perfect. It's 25 to 100 times faster than current 3D printing technology. So I watched him give that talk, and I had 3 reactions to it. And the first was what I would have thought anyway, which was like, whoa, that's really cool, nice. Simple. My second reaction was, of course it's 25 to 100 times faster and not 7% faster. Of course, as D. Simone says, the next iteration is going to be 1,000 times faster. And my third reaction was, now I get it. Like, now I get how 3D printing totally disrupts global manufacturing and freight. Because why would you ever pay to manufacture something, 20,000 of something in China, and pay to ship it, and pay to store it, and have waste, and have loss, and have theft, and have it go out of date, when you literally can push the button and get the thing? And if you're saying to yourself, hang on a minute, the water bottle and coffee cup in my goodie bag came from China, which they did, remember that we're here. Think about the trajectory. This is about where we are going and what we can expect, not in 50 years' time, but in 10 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 2 years' time. I'll tell you one more story about the way that attending the executive program affected me. And it's to do with agriculture. It's not meat specifically, but tomorrow you're going to hear from the incredible Raymond McCauley, who's going to talk to you about digital biology. And when I did the executive program, Raymond McCauley got up on stage and he talked to us about bioengineered milk. He freaked me out. He's like bioengineered milk and this team, and they've made this milk, and they've taken yeast and they've genetically modified it with cow protein. And I don't understand any of the science. He can explain it all to you. But he's like, basically they've brewed milk, and it's milk. It's like cow milk, right? It's chemically and genetically, it's exactly cow milk. It just hasn't gone through a cow. It's come from the lab. And this team, they've done this with cow milk, and they've done it with human milk, and they've done it with narwhal milk, and like narwhals, the unicorns of the sea, right? So they've done all this milk, and I'm watching him give this talk, and I'm like, that sounds disgusting. Like, who would want that? It's gross, right? Okay, set that to one side for a second. Late that night, I'm having an offline conversation with Salim Ismail, who's the founding executive director of SU. And we weren't talking about the milk. We weren't even talking about bioengineered meat. We were talking about Modern Meadow, which is a company that does bioengineered eggs. And I will tell you, like, no points for guessing, I am a super lefty liberal hippie, right? Like, I need to know the name of the chicken before I'll eat an egg. I'm that girl. Like, don't go out to eat with me. It's awful. And so he's telling me about these eggs, and my reaction to the eggs is the same as my reaction to the milk. Like, ew, gross. Who would want it? Sounds disgusting. And he was like, Kaila, they're not targeting you. They don't care about you. They're not interested in the hippies. They're not interested in the vegans. They don't even care about Whole Foods, which in the US is a pretty substantial market. They care about the industrial caterers who buy eggs by the thousands of kilos. And they need them in powder form, and in liquid form, and in tube form. And they need them to last longer on the shelf and be 100% salmonella free. And they need them total certainty of supply. And they need them to brown nicely around the edges and taste more like egg. And they need them to be cheaper. And by every one of those metrics, the bioengineered product wins. And I went, shit, you're right. And actually, maybe the bioengineered milk product wins too. That's a pretty significant industry in New Zealand and Australia. Are we really paying attention to the nature of that disruptive threat, to that possibility? I hope we will now. And in New Zealand, you know, I think Amy Fletcher, who's going to be here on Wednesday, mentioned that something like 70% of our export economy is agriculture-driven. And we've got disruption coming to agriculture from all sorts of different directions. We had disruption coming to farming where we're taking traditional methods of farming and automating them, right? So we have self-driving tractors. We have robots that can prune trees, that can jump from tree to tree. We have drones fitted out with image recognition, artificially intelligent image recognition that can count the number of grapes on a grapevine. But this is all like taking the way that we do farming and still doing it, but just automating pieces of it. And then we have disruption to farming coming from totally different areas that we would consider completely orthogonal to what we think of as farming. So I came across this just recently. This is the doubling in price performance of LED lighting. So in the past 5 or 6 years, the cost of LED lighting has come down by 90%, and it's doubled in lifespan. So I saw this chart, and I'm like, sweet. I can get a cheaper light bulb, and it'll last me longer. What is this actually disrupting? Indoor farming. So it used to be, because it was so expensive to power, indoor farming was the exclusive domain of, shall we say, certain high-value crops. But now, because of this trajectory with LED lighting, we've got indoor farms and disused nightclubs in New Jersey that are supplying produce to New York at price parity with organic produce coming out of California. The world's largest indoor farm in Japan is 100 times more productive per square foot than traditional farming. It uses 40% less power, generates 80% less food waste, and critical for countries like New Zealand and Australia, 99% less water. Last week, after the election, this guy, you might think he's a dork, militant atheist Richard Dawkins, he wrote an open letter to Scientific American. And he said, following Brexit and the Trump election, he encouraged New Zealand to think about becoming the new Athens. He said we should write letters to every Nobel Prize winner, every Royal Society scientist and PhD, and invite them to come here and, like, you know, make this place the bastion of forward thinking and progressive thought. And that's fine. Like, I wouldn't turn those people away. But I'm looking out at you guys, and I see 1,500 of the most open, progressive minds in our region of the world. And I think we don't need to wait for the Nobel Prize winners and the Royal Society scientists. We can start now. That's what we're here for the next 3 days. I expect nothing less of you than a revolution in the way that we approach our society. Thank you.